This is the Lenovo Tab P11. Well, the first gen. Why don't we check it out? So this Lenovo Tab P11 was released in February 2021 with an MSRP of starting around $229 USD. Now there are a couple of models for this first gen Tab P11. Before we get into it, why don't we unbox this and check out what we get. Unboxing the device, we get the tablet itself. On the left side of the box, we get the pamphlets with the manual, and that's pretty much about it. We don't get any stickers or anything. On the right side, we get a USB-C to USB-A cable, and then you're also supposed to get a 20-watt USB-A wall charger. But mine did not come with that, it just came with a USB-C to USB-C cable. Sometimes if you get something used, it will come with different things instead. And that's about it for what we get in the box. Why don't we check out the physical dimensions and specs before we actually turn on the device. Now let's talk about the design and build the device. On the front, it features an 11-inch display and a front camera. We'll explore more both once we set up the device. The frame is made from aluminum and anodized to give it that sleek and durable finish. On the bottom of the device, we get the 4 pogo pins used for special accessories. On the right side, we have 2 speakers and the USB-C port, which is rated at USB 2.0. On the left, we have 2 speakers and the power button, while on the top, we have the volume buttons, access to the microSD card slot, and some microphones. The buttons are made with that same aluminum as the frame, and there is no trace of a headphone jack. Now, even at this price point, it's a trade-off we're gonna have to live with. Moving on to the back, we're greeted with a single lens 13 megapixel camera capable of 1080p video recording at 30 FPS and a single LED flash. And that's about it. Which brings us to the dimensions. It measures 258.4 by 163 by 7.5 millimeters, or 10.17 by 6.42 by 0.3 inches. For weight, it won't fit on my scale, so we'll just have to use the stated weight of around 490 grams. So not only is this thing thin, but it's also lightweight. Now real quick, I don't have one, but in 2021 Apple released the 9th gen iPad, as well as a few others, but we're not going to be comparing a Pro model iPad to a non-Pro level Lenovo tablet. If we quickly compare these two side by side, our Lenovo tablet is slightly taller, giving it more horizontal real estate and thinner, while the iPad is wider and shorter. Surprisingly, the Lenovo tablet is only 3 grams heavier. Alright, enough of that, let's talk about the device we actually have. Turning on our device and set this thing up. Alright, while this thing turns on, let's finalize our hardware specs. There are a lot, so I won't say them all, but this device comes in 3 configurations. 4GB of RAM with 64 gigs of inbuilt storage for $229, 4 gigs of RAM with 128GB of inbuilt storage for $249, and 6GB of RAM with 128GB of storage for $299. Now the RAM is LPDDR4X, all of it soldered. And don't forget, all of these have upgradable storage via the microSD card slot. Now the device is powered by the Qualcomm Snapdragon 662 processor, which is an octa-core chip running at up to 2 GHz. Now talking about the screen, the P11 supports an 11-inch 2K 2000 by 1200 IPS screen, which has decent narrow bezels and supposedly has an anti-fingerprint screen. Now we already have a tempered glass screen protector on this, so we can't really test if it's really anti-fingerprint, but it's nice to use for everyday use. The display also reaches a brightness of 400 nits, and it has a 75 to 7700 mAh battery, rated for, and I quote, up to 15 hours on a single charge, up to 12 hours of video playback, web browsing, and up to 15 for music playback. Finally, something I missed on the first look at is the mid-field dual microphone array with smart voice digital signal processor, pretty much just the microphone, as well as everything here we have on screen. So we'll just take a moment, we'll list everything out. And that's it for hardware specs. Now most of these we will be testing later on. In the meantime, let's actually set up our device. The setup process is pretty straightforward. In its stock state, it runs Android 10. You don't need to worry about creating accounts or connecting to the internet for basic setup. Just power it on and follow the on-screen instructions and you're good to go. If you want, connect to a network or set up offline. Then select your time and date. Then just select the Google services, whether you accept them or not. Enter a password or just do it later. And that's about it. Alright, now that we have the device all set up, let's move on to device testing and see what this thing is all about. For device testing, I broke this up into two overall categories. Performance, how well it can handle everyday tasks or more heavier loaded ones like playing games. And usability, which covers pretty much everything else like accessory usage, camera, charging, and extra tests. We're going to change things up and start with our usability tests. First up is our charge test. Plugging the device in, I've noticed that it gives a nice color-coded animation to what the current battery life is at. Here on screen, I have a chart for the quoted 30 watt, 15 watt, and fast charge types and the amount of hours it takes to charge from 0 to 100. Now, the device is capped at 18 watts for charging, and it is able to charge up to 80% in 2 hours at that 18 watts. Quoted takes around 6 hours. 30 watts, even though it's capped at 18, charges to 3 hours full charge. Fast charge glitches out, and then lastly we have our 15 at that same 6 hours. Seems the device slows down after charging for a certain amount of time. For a camera test, this is always twofold, the microphone and camera test. I took a few photos given the various options available within the camera app on both the front and rear camera. Flash, no flash, and here's how they all turned out. Now for these nighttime shots, I'm just going to give some insight. It was super low level. Anything else without any light was just non-existent. You couldn't see, it was pretty much just black. Decent, not too bad, but who really uses the rear camera on a tablet anymore? And speaking of the microphone, here's a quick mic test for the video. Let me know how it sounds. So this is 1x zoom camera test, and we're just going to quickly zoom into 2x zoom. All the way to 6x zoom. We'll go back to 1. There are no quick buttons to switch zoom out for some reason. So here is the selfie camera test. Doesn't seem like I can actually select on screen for focus. So it seems like autofocus is the only thing allowed. But something I've noticed is, if I try to hold it steady, we can actually zoom in all the way to 6x as well. Which is very interesting for a selfie camera. Alright, this is standard, like low light. We can see there's a light shining in from this side. But if we were to go just a little bit further, yeah, this is pretty much nighttime recording. But yeah, this pretty much concludes our camera testing with microphone and video and everything that we need. Let's move on to our accessories. For accessories, I'll give it its own section and details following our test, so let's just move on to our final test for this section, speakers. Now the thing with device speaker tests is it's hard to actually hear what it sounds like depending on the microphone you're using. If you use your phone to record this, it's only going to pick up the audio that the microphone can hear. So we'll just give it a listen and see what it sounds like. Just like any other tutorial, let's talk about the prep. Grab any computer running running Windows 10, a micro USB cable, and your HTC One M8 on SD card. Alright, with all that out of the way, let's continue this YouTube viewing and move on to battery life. The Lenovo Tab P11 packs a 7700 mAh battery. Why don't we put those numbers to the test that we saw earlier? That expected to be a 15-hour playback of music and 12 hours of web browsing and video playback. But again, those are just claims. Let's see how accurate they are. Real quick disclaimer about the battery test. This is a used device. Unsure how the user actually used it before I do, so we'll see how accurate these numbers are compared to the health of the battery. Just the basic tests of music, web browsing, and video playback. Each test was ran 3 times to give an average result. And here's what we get. The blue are my results, while the red is what they claim. To explain some of these playback tests, video playback, web browsing, music playback, there were 2 options we could have overall tested out. I just tested out them all connected to Wi-Fi, especially since web browsing you need an active internet connection. I didn't have enough time to run the offline version of these, so you could get more hours, you could get less hours for offline media playback, or you could end up getting the same results. For light gaming and heavy gaming, light gaming included things like Clash of Clans or some light emulation. Heavy gaming included things like COD Mobile or PUBG Mobile. We'll review gaming later on to see how they actually handle it, but these are the playback hours of around 10 hours for light gaming and around 3 hours for heavy gaming. Now, final thing about all these battery tests, your mileage may vary. You may get better, you may get worse, but it all ultimately depends on what you're using the device for and overall how you're using the device. So all in all, that's pretty good. All right, with battery tests out of the way, let's get on with seeing how the actual device handles on its software specs. So when it comes to actually using the Lenovo Tab P11, it's actually not that bad. The only thing that isn't good about this is the stock Lenovo operating system that they have for Android. So even basic settings is perfectly fine. It shows even basic battery, storage, apps and permissions, your Lenovo ID, pretty much everything else you want on. Smart navigation is annoying because it keeps turning on every so often if you use the pen. Productivity mode is pretty much their desktop oriented client. It does have face recognition. So there are a bunch of features with this that kind of don't show outlined. Basic Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, Ethernet if you have it plugged into a dock, data saver, Wi-Fi, hotspot and tethering, airplane mode, VPN. For brightness, here we have everything else. Smart rotate, brightness, adaptive brightness, eye protection, dark theme, which will turn on and off if you set that. Wallpaper color mode, double tap to wake, raise to wake, screen timeout, auto rotate, and pretty much everything else you need. Now right now I have gesture navigation enabled, 3-button navigation. We'll put the 3 buttons down here and they will always be on the screen. Now I don't like 3-button navigation if you're going to use the tablet on for a long time. I like gesture navigation because there is no actual bar on the screen. Now, if you're going to use this for notes, the choice is up to you. It just doesn't hide. Now, to figure out the actual version of Android this thing is running, under System, under About Tablet, we have just Android 11 with the 2023 security update. Now, I'm unsure if we can actually change the operating system that is running on this, but a way to fix this is by running a different launcher. Now, I've yet to find a launcher that I would put in place of this, but it's pretty much decent. Something I do like is the scheduled power on and off and the backup settings. Now under apps and notifications, here's pretty much all of our app info, conversations as we have that, notifications for apps, permission managers. So all in all, between all the versions of Android and everything out there, this one gives you the most flexibility with actually controlling your applications. And then finally, the things I like to check out in the settings are the privacy. So we have our permissions manager, passwords, everything here, as well as manage ad personalization. I would highly suggest turning this off, and the location. And that's it for settings. Applications are pretty much easy to get to. You just swipe up from anywhere on the screen if you're using the stock launcher. Here's all of our applications. And then everything is pretty much easy to get to. You can swipe down, double swipe. Here's our quick settings. Notification free mode is nice because it doesn't actually show you the notifications. It just stays here at the top. And yeah, automatically enable dark theme, eye protection mode we covered, and built-in screen recorder. Now I just want to bring up productivity mode. It brings all of the buttons to the bottom, how you would use it if you were in desktop mode. They just call it productivity mode. Something I didn't mention, productivity mode appears to use a little bit more battery, which I don't understand why, but it's just something I've noticed. But then again, your mileage may vary. Why don't we check out some YouTube? Here on YouTube, it does show a nice scaling over the entire interface. It is pretty nice on viewing angles as well. But yeah, it is nice. The only thing I don't like is the weird gesture controls for getting to your opened applications. But yeah, that's about it. I didn't cover everything for software. There's a lot more to this, but we have a lot more need to cover first, so let's get into that. Let's get into some gaming. First, I'm going to try out some emulation. So this is a Nintendo DS emulator running New Super Mario Bros. Now, the performance we got within the emulation is dependent on the emulator itself, the save file, and any settings enabled or disabled. I actually went through testing this quite a lot and wasn't able to find a solid choice of emulator settings. This ultimately could have been the device just not being powerful enough, but it was able to run the emulator quite well on its stock settings. Now I didn't enable any performance mode, and it's at quite stable at around 50 FPS. Now we're going to move on to a more demanding game like COD Mobile. Now with COD Mobile, I just went into it, left all the settings as is, and it seems to actually handle pretty well. No FPS drops or inconsistencies. So let's check out some gameplay and see how it goes. The only thing I didn't find on this thing yet was a game mode. So a lot of phones and other stuff have a specific game mode. I mean, right now we're just going through the tutorial there, but that's crazy. I'll just do advanced. This is a big screen to play on, by the way. Now I know this is just the tutorial and we're on the medium settings quality. I did play a couple rounds and it acted the exact same as the tutorial. I don't have the footage to show that, unfortunately. But it handles games pretty well. Let's just check out the CPU benchmarks and everything to see how this thing actually handles in comparison to today's other tablets. And to finalize our testing out, we have our Qualcomm 8-core CPU, that's 14 nanometers. Our CPU architecture of 4 cores at 1.8 gigahertz, and 4 cores at 2.2 GHz. It's a 64-bit processor. And here's the GPU OpenCL score that we got after we ran the test. We're just going to see how it compares to other devices that are similar to it, and even devices that are older. Now, this doesn't mean that its performance is a lot worse or a lot better. It's all up to the use case of the user and the device. Here on benchmarksul.com, we have our tablet. Now, their review is a little bit dated compared to ours. We're running Android 11, but everything else is pretty much identical to our device. For the 3D Mark, it's got a nice score of 378 at 2 FPS and 2 FPS. So it's not very GPU heavy, especially given how newer the device is. Now, the device isn't very GPU heavy, meaning it's just not going to compare to newer tablets that are a little bit more expensive, or even the older Samsung tablets. But this is more of a budget tablet than, a gaming style tablet. To finish up testing, here we have the 3D Mark Slingshot Extreme test. Then we have the Geekbench 5 CPU test. Following this up, we have our PC Mark Work 2.0 performance test. We have the Andro Bench storage speed test. And to finish things out, we have our Antutu performance test. So all in all, the Lenovo Tab P11 seems to hold up pretty well. It's not as good as plenty of other devices that were released within that year, or even some older devices. But if you just want a tablet that takes notes or watches YouTube or anything pretty much like that, this thing is perfectly fine for that. Gets good battery life as well. And that concludes our testing center. Just to change things up, why don't we take a look at the used market for the tablet and its accessories before we talk about the pen. So looking at the used market, a lot of the newer tablets seem to be, well, first up, the Lenovo Tab P12, the Lenovo Tab Plus, the Lenovo Tab M11. But we're primarily looking for the Lenovo Tab P11 Plus, first generation, the model number TB-J616F. So these things seem to be going for 130 brand new, maybe 140, 150 bucks. But you can get this one for 150 bucks plus $20 delivery, depending on where you're at. And it comes with the keyboard attachment, which it's 65 if you just get the keyboard separately. We're going to take a look at the currently sold listings to see what they've actually sold for. So the tablet seems to be selling for 100 bucks, 150. This one with everything seems to have sold for 170. So the tablet itself, depending on which one you can find, seems to be selling for around 100 bucks. Which is actually pretty good. This one with the shattered screen sold for 30. This one sold for 120. So the tablet itself, if you can find it, it's about like 100 bucks. While everything else is at least 110, 120. Anything going on 200, I would actually just go ahead and get the newer version of the tablet. So this guy is selling the case, pen, and a Logitech wireless keyboard with the tablet for 140. So it's actually a pretty good deal, especially since the tablet and the pen are 100 bucks and at least 50. All right, with that short break out of the way, I know it doesn't make sense to go back now, but accessories for the tablet, which we saw on eBay, we can get a pen, a clock stand, and a keyboard and stand. Now, I only have the pen, so that's what we'll be covering. And here's what we got. This is the optional Lenovo Precision Pen 2, which you can buy. It's great for note-taking, sketching, even marking up documents. Offers up to 4,096 pressure levels and tilt detection, which makes it great for writing. It's very responsive, but the accuracy might not be on par with higher-end styluses in today's market. But for $70 USD brand new, you can get this actually cheaper on other markets. Why don't we check out the pen itself? Its physical attributes of the pen: it weighs around 15 grams, made of aluminum with a dimension spec of 0.38 by 0.35 by 5.91 inches, or 9.65 by 8.89 by 150 millimeters. On the pen itself, we also have two shortcut buttons, which are non-programmable for some reason. Unless I'm doing something wrong, you just can't change it in the settings. This little light here that indicates low battery, charge, and pair status. It also uses a USB-C to charge under this rubber flap. And the pen tip is removable, so we can easily change that out. And it has up to 246 hours on a single charge, or about 10.25 days of use. Now, unless you have this thing in constant use, there's no real way to test that. In my testing, after around 1 hour to full charge, I was able to get at least 2 months of use using it a couple hours a day, around 3 days a week. And that's because of after 10 minutes of inactivity, the pen will go into sleep mode, conserving battery life, which makes it last longer, which is a plus. So it's not always going to be on, and you don't have to worry about that. Now we can move on to the final stages of this review. What do we like about the Lenovo Tab P11? It's got a 2K crisp and clear display, nice for viewing content on all angles. The Dolby Atmos quad speakers are great. The battery life is very impressive for what it offers, especially at this price. It offers even better battery life when using it just for notes or anything, so it makes a great note-taking tablet, especially since you can just have it in your bag, don't have to worry about constantly charging it. And the optional Lenovo Pen Precision 2 is decent for taking notes, casual sketching, but it's nice. The bad, there's some bloatware pre-installed. It's got a decent used market, but not the best considering the age. The user interface is kind of mediocre, especially since it's Lenovo's style of Android 10. The swipe shortcuts get really annoying if you use the full screen mode. So here's our final thoughts. For around $229 USD brand new, you can get the Lenovo Tab P11 in the market of 2021. For around $100, it's a solid choice for those who just need a basic Android tablet. The battery life is pretty solid. I use this thing when it comes down to traveling or writing down notes, as the battery life is very, very good. Now there are some more options in settings and features that we didn't really cover in this video, as we could probably go on and on with the specific Android 10 information that the Lenovo Tab P11 offers. But that's really it. Let me know down in the comment section below if you have any questions about the tablet or anything specific you'd like me to check out next. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more tech reviews and tech videos, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.